any monitoring tool, we're going to focus on a few things, including the kind of best practices, right? So where we published this best practice a while ago about the life cycle of the best performance management. So monitoring and optimization is, one of those critical phases in the SAP lifecycle management, and so kind of we focusing on the monitoring and the optimization side. Of course, you want to be able to equip yourself, be up to date with the tools. You don't want to bring a knife to a gunfight, if you know. So then, where do we start with tools? So we go back to, I would say, the selection of the tools based on what we know. These are some of the areas we publish about how to select, what tools are good for your various monitoring needs. So in one of our blog, we wrote about this kind of a standard things to look at, assess your tools. So today, when we look at the individual tools, we'll try to look at some of these areas and look at their strengths and weaknesses, where they focus on, as far as providing the various notification monitoring management, and compare them that way. So it's just a systematic way to do that. Again, I do have a matrix. I can provide the link to download. It's not released yet, so once you, we'll probably publish in the future, but we'll try and keep that updated. Anyway, so let's step through. I have, probably depending on, what your experience is, we're going to take a look at a few things. First of all, everybody knows CCMS. So if you using Solution Manager, this is actually Solution Manager 7.1 system. The old Solution Manager technical monitoring is still very useful in terms of what we think monitors the SAP traditional ABAP, and based on the technology of centralized monitoring. So as a central monitor, you can still configure various remote systems, ABAP, Java. It's going to be based on the CCMS agents, and be able to connect to and have already predefined sets of monitors you can use based on the monitoring scenario. So here we have various different things. We have Java stacks monitoring. We have BW, we have ECC, we have databases ranging from SQL Server to DB2 to Oracle to HANA. So what people went to Solution Manager, they kind of forgot that CCMS is actually the base instrumentation. So as the base instrumentation, SAP still have to deliver the measurements and metrics, availability and performance counter. So whatever you use, you still rely on that. So that's not going to go away. So as far as the, we think the CCMS, whether people use them or not, it's there. That's providing the feed for many other tools. And in many cases, when you're not able to get the root cause analysis in whatever tools, you still need to get onto CCMS and know how to get to the data. So as a matter of fact, in our Solution Manager, we configure both the old central monitoring as well as the new MAI, which is the monitoring architecture alerting infrastructure. Right. So I think for CCMS, these work really well. As far as even availability basis monitoring, there's a whole range of things you can do with the existing CCMS. A lot of our customers still use this. We have a lot of experience in terms of tweaking to give it what you need as far as availability and performance monitoring. So in this case, I think CCMS does a fine job. It's not going to go anywhere any day soon. One of the areas that, of course, this fits into is we can take a look at the DBA cockpit, right? So today, CCMS provides one of the feed is the DBA cockpit. So this is Solution Manager's DBA cockpit, and it itself provides a very good tool for, I guess, DBA and basis people to, of course, you don't need implementation as far as installing the tool. You still need to configure it. So as far as ease of implementation, everybody's familiar with SAP GUI. The configuration requires the setup of the database connection. So you got to have the agent. So SAP has the diagnostic agent for each database local to the host that will monitor the database services, and the DBA cockpit will pull that information in. It also requires a SAP host agent, which provides the basic for the CPU memory utilization from the OS side. So I think this tool does a good job for basis DBA. It's easy to access. And there are various views you can look at. For instance, if you look at here the HANA database, for instance, you can go to various views. We can look at, for instance, let's go here. You can look at performance. You can drill down and get reports from it. So, for instance, you're looking at, statistics server, for instance. So all of these pull from the database connection to the remote database. You can then provide an ease of access to look at various things like space management. You can even have the space management. You can look at the alerts and the overview of the system. So from one solution manager, you can configure various different types of database. The only drawback here is that you have to install the various database client on Solution Manager. So if you want to connect to the HANA database, you need to have a HANA client installed. You want to connect to Oracle, you got to do all that. As part of the database connection, you're required to have that database client, right? But from a performance metric standpoint, it is based on a lot of what they call the auto ABAP schedule. So all of this information runs in ABAP. It is collecting the various different metrics from the database using the SQL into the database, pulling that information out of either statistics collected on snapshots. And then you have also the DBA planning calendar for backups, consistency checks, etc. that feeds this information. So a lot of here, you got alerts here. These are based on validation checks. So essentially, the DBA cockpit schedule these DBA planning calendar to run these checks and then provide you with the various different alerts and modification. So that's DBA side. I think there is a significant number of other. There's, in fact, you can even look at. We'll go in here from scratch and see when you come into DBA cockpit, you are able to pick the database. So the only problem here is that you got to be in the GUI, right? And the alerting you have to configure for notification. So as far as database tool is concerned, unless you're sitting at the console, you still need to configure your alert and notification, which is where the weakness is for DBA cockpit. But as far as trying to get a central point in a native tool, I would say start here if you don't have anything. It's a minimum configuration. Just start here. You have the ability to drill in, get more details. So here's an example. I'm gonna go into performance warehouse. So in Solution Manager today, if you use DBA Cockpit, you want to store data for reporting, you have to basically enable the data warehousing. So it's going to store that information for things like when we go into this type of performance warehouse, you can look up historical information. So in this case, I'm trying to pull up database, host memory. So all these charts here, information about whether it's going to be size-based, IO workload information. These come straight from the database connection to the various remote database, but the information is stored in the in the data performance warehouse inside Solution Manager. Okay, so this you can only do when you use Solution Manager as a DBA cockpit central to monitor other systems. And as I said, there's kind of a lack of service monitoring. There's kind of notification. You still rely on CCMS notification. But you can monitor your instance status, your capacity, your utilization, size. You can do, let's say in this one, you want to pull up top tables. Like this one doesn't show any table size. So depending on your database, some of these metrics have to be passed into your performance warehouse. Okay, so that's a high-level view of the DBA cockpit. You can again go into various different systems. So we have MaxDB, we have SQL Server. You have, again, you can install all the different clients, make the database connection, and make sure that you have a Solution Manager diagnostic running on the remote host. And then you pretty much can configure the connection to the native database. You can see the connection names with the DB user. So it's getting a lot of information from native SQL and procedures and packages. So that's the DBA cockpit, and I won't spend too much time on that. When you are using HANA, obviously, you have the ability to use the native HANA tool, which is the Studio. So in Studio, it's used for many different things. It's used for lifecycle management. It's used for development in terms of development workbench. And it's an Eclipse-based Java tool. So you basically have to install the HANA Studio and using the various perspective. So they call them perspective. So the administration is a perspective inside. And from that perspective, you get the monitoring view. So here we have, at the very basic level, the system monitor, right? So if you got nothing else, you will install the HANA if you're running HANA. And then you have to run this on your desktop by installing the Eclipse and the Java installation from SAP. Doing the remote connection, it uses JDBC as a connection. With HANA Studio, you have kind of a couple of different things. There's remote from the Studio, or you can monitor on the actual HANA appliance host as well using a Python-based version of this. But essentially, most people just use this for the DBA. So it's okay if you got a couple of HANA systems. You don't have a lot of. So it does provide you with, for instance, anything here. You can get into the alerts, for instance. It will give you alerts, right? It will give you based on all alerts. So you have time slices. So some of these systems, you have the ability to look at different time slices. You have last 15 minutes. You can have last hour, last 24 hours, and you can put the refresh interval here, so you can actually get current information. But so you have also landscape information that you can monitor the various different services. So if you are monitoring the, so if we go back here, look at some services started, some services are not running, etc. That's monitoring high-level overview of memory utilization, CPU, disk, but you also have the various services that HANA runs. So HANA is based on service, so you have index responsible for providing data, but you have other things like daemon that watches over all the services. So this kind of a landscape in HANA is monitored at the service level, so that you can get all this information. You can look at alerts as we looked at it before. These alerts are based on about 20 different pre-configured checks that HANA provides out of the box. So all of these are pre-configured. You can tweak them, you can customize some of them, like host usage information, etc. You can go and tweak them, but they run on a regular basis. Okay. For performance, we typically, if you have no other tools, you're using HANA and you're trying to look at load, there is a load tab under performance. You can go here and check various different things like physical memory. You have so this is kind of a almost real-time monitor. It looks at so if you're doing a load test, maybe this is something that's useful, but it doesn't have any historical information. You can go and scale back a couple hours about it, but there's not a lot of historical data for you to use trending or analysis. Okay, so from the collection standpoint, it's pulling information out of the HANA statistics tables and presenting you that information. The alerts are there. You can configure alerts. So for instance, if you want, for instance, the expensive trace for statements that run longer than a certain amount of time belonging to users or applications, you can activate the trace in here. If you have the access to trace, you can activate the trace. Then you will get long SQL running in the database that create alerts. Okay, so so by essence, you have to enable the trace. A lot of these traces are delivered turn off. So you can do user-specific trace. You can do you might have a passport number. The application pass you to end-to-end tracing. You can trace by the SQL, and that's really what happens when you go into looking at threads or sessions. All of this information pulling from the statistics tables. Okay. SQL plan cache, all of these information are in there. So it's a decent tool if you have a couple database and you have a person that's a dedicated DBA that's looking at information. But typically, if your basis and you're running on the application level like BW on HANA, you may not be spending the time in the HANA at all, and so you want that information to trickle up from some other layer. Then you want to look at some other tools. So some clients, they can enable the alerting from here, but typically you would need to have a high level of monitoring alerts so that you can take proactive action. So as the HANA admin console, HANA Studio itself, there is when we look at other areas, there's no recovery actions. You can't, do anything with alerts as far as except notification. There is no association of, maybe run this script to fix that. So there's no service monitoring either. There's pretty much the native HANA database, right? The only process automation it has is these pre-configured checks, but the local recovery actions, etc. There isn't any. So so in the configuration side, you use this primarily to manage the database, change parameters, etc. But it's not really a monitoring tool per se, even though it does provide some information there. So that's one area of the. So if you're using HANA, of course, it can't monitor any other database. So the problem is you come to different tool to monitor different database, and that's to us is not an enterprise solution per se. It's more of a point solution for managing the native database. Continuing with HANA, we have the other portion, which is the cockpit. So if you look at the cockpit, and what is a HANA cockpit? A HANA cockpit is something that SAP came out with. This is actually one view of the cockpit, but it's a web base. You can go to, for instance, this is the same view. It's based on the SAP HANA using Fiori tiles. So what you have is the default pre-configured delivered tiles from HANA, and this runs on top of SAP's HANA Access, which external application. So it's an app server sitting on a database. Okay, so it serves up now. It runs on this engine, therefore you can only get information about this particular server. It's not built for enterprise monitoring, meaning I can't monitor database that are sitting somewhere else, right? But from these tiles, some of them are clickable. You can get into it. It's alerts, what's going on. I mean, there's a lot of things here that you can't really do except just get a high level dashboard views, nice pretty tiles. You can drill in, you can get some level of information like this memory thing, but you know, you can't really get much else except this high level tiles. So it's a very kind of high level pretty dashboard, if you will. It's not really control the database per se. There are some areas where you can go into manage lifecycle applications, like deploying the application on top of HANA. But beyond that, you know, you have some level of one-step click in getting performance metrics, but the information itself is not really useful for reporting or service management per se. So, you know, you can go in here and get. So to me, it's it's another attempt to pretty beautify the somewhat access. You know, it's almost an experiment with the Fiori apps providing these tiles. But beyond that, there's a lot of these. Well, maybe the dump analysis. I actually think this is similar to some other tools we use for looking at dumps on the system, right? I mean, it's pulling out information about traces. You got, you know, these trace. Yes, okay. So it's nice to look at a trace from one point, but you can't do that if you know, unless you can connect to databases. So this is they call hot cockpit. So HANA cockpit. Again, this is not the be-all-end-all tool, because the problem here is that since it relies on the access engine of the HANA database, if HANA is down, this thing doesn't run, right? If you access this, it will be down. It's trying to access Solution Manager when Solution Manager is down. You're not going to get anything. Right, so that's kind of, I see a problem there. You can't use it as you know, can't stop the database, because of course if you stop it, the application is down because its access engine is down, right? But there are SMTP based emails you can configure for specific checks to you know, notify. So similar to Studio, you can configure some of that information. So that's kind of the HANA cockpit, if you will. There's no recovery actions involved. There's no you know, service or automation. It's just a point-and-click web-based using, you know, UI5 and Fiori. Okay. So back to here. So so we talked about Studio. We talked about cockpit, DBA cockpit, and then HANA cockpit. I actually prefer DBA cockpit because it has, you can connect to multiple types of database remotely. The other tool that is available from SAP you can use is the landscape virtualization management. So LVM, most people don't think of LVM as monitoring. It wasn't designed that way, but it actually has monitoring built into it. There's some pros and cons of using the you know, LVM for that purpose. So what is LVM? Well, LVM is a add-on tool that sits on top of a NetWeaver 742 Java stack. So first you have to install the NetWeaver 742, and then after that you do a package add-on, and the package add-on provide you with this LVM application. So it's served out by the SAP. So you can see here the connection served out by the SAP web server as an app. Okay. So high-level dashboards will give you the monitoring is kind of somewhat native because it does provide you with the instance level monitoring. So as far as the host agent that's pulling this information in, it's using SAP host agent and diagnostic agent, right? So if you are trying to manage systems, you have to have that infrastructure. You have to have that SAP host agent running on the managed node and the diagnostic agent on there. Right, and it uses primarily the JDBC connection and web services to look at systems. So if you're looking at this view where you go from into operations, LVM is designed to do a couple of things. One is automated capacity management. So if it monitors your CPU utilization, for instance, on a virtualized environment, and it can trigger, for instance, the failover or the addition of additional app servers if it sees that there is capacity that's being overutilized and it needs to add further capacity. So the idea around LVM is that. So the monitoring was added in order to facilitate that. So when we go to monitoring, you can see that your system landscape is based on pools of systems. What types? Very rudimentary, so you can see available metrics available in your SAP. Pretty much some response time, number of users. The host information is pulled from the SAP host agent. Therefore, you get the standard CPU, memory, and then some other areas like the instance health, etc., that it can manage the instance and bring it up and down automation standpoint. So from a virtualization point of view, you do get that. You also get some basic monitoring of the capacity utilization by setting specific configurations. So in configuration, you can override some of that if you wanted to set various different configurations. So you can go into the instance itself. So there are templates that you can manage that from that standpoint. So from LVM, again, one of the advantages here, you can monitor multiple systems, multiple types of systems. But you do have to have a significant amount of work to add the management host with the SAP host agent and the diagnostic agent, and then configure them in here. And once you do that, you can do things like mass configuration of start, stop. Part of the ability of LVM is to be able to monitor systems and start, stop them. So if you're doing a maintenance window, you can configure all of your systems in a pool, and you can say, mass operation, stop all of these at the same time, start all of these at the same time, and then you can monitor their status, availability, and all that. So I would use this if you're going into monitoring from an availability standpoint, and then from a capacity standpoint. From a there's not recovery action per se, except that there are automated failover. So if you have virtualized SAP resource in an LVM pool, you can define failover, which of course it monitors and it moves the resources around. It's kind of a part of its capacity capability. For reports, you have a system log type report. Be back here. I think there is a reporting. You can go to reports. So there's a out of the box some CAN report, system load report, CPU report. I'm not a big fan of these because there's not a lot you can do with the CAN reports. But if you just want a quick, if it's monitoring information, you want a quick, look at various different systems, how it's utilized. System load report, let's say. You can put in an ID, pick a system, and you get a quick, report of the utilization memory, but like that's not really useful in terms of unless you can go write a lot of reports yourself. These kind of reports are very kind of high level. If your management say, I want to see how utilized your system was in the last month or something. So those come out of that LVM. Yeah. What else about LVM? I think one of the most interesting thing about LVM mostly is the automation. So, for instance, the post copy automation for either ABAP or Java, you can integrate them into here as a pre-configured checklist against system settings, and they will basically run these things for you as part of automation checklist. When start, stop, different activities can have a trigger and alert from that perspective. Okay. So that's cover LVM. I think I skip over some of these quickly because I think solution manager is kind of where it still goes back to. So let's take a look at Soulman. We wrote about the setup of Soulman a lot, so if you're interested, take a look at our blog series. We have detailed steps on, I think we have a bunch of also slide shares on these topics. So we have here Soulman, which monitors system based on the discovered components or scenario. So on this one, BW on HANA. As you can see, the SAP ABAP stack has an app server, has a database, sits on top of a couple of Linux boxes. Right? So this is served up from Soulman as a web page using Flash actually. So there's not a lot you can do in here besides double clicking and getting something else. So if I wanted to look at my, I don't know, alerts here, Soulman will launch into another web page, brings up the alerts that you can take a look at. The alerts are based on collection from remote systems and aggregated and simplified down to counts like min, max, average. Some of them, for instance, this one, high CPU utilization. Well, it's happened like 565 times, right? So the idea here is that the alert inbox in Solution Manager triggers from various different metrics that it brings in and provides you with these out of the box, reduce the noise. But in reducing the noise, you don't get the granularity. So for instance, this one, it happened today, let's say, and then you can, go into it. You can see the various alerts that happen, right? So this constant drill down, and eventually you get to chart, 5 minutes. So if you want to do that, it will launch. If you get into the metric monitoring, it will launch a chart, or you can do it directly from here. I find this chart kind of hard to use. It's based on Flash and provides you the information. But you can't really do anything. You can't interact with it. You can't, it's like, great, okay, what do I do with this chart? I guess you can copy paste it somewhere, but this level of metric monitoring is pretty standard with Solution Manager. The other thing is, if you're used to CCMS providing you with like a ton of different metrics, Solution Manager doesn't really bring in everything. It brings in something it thinks is important. So if you want to add a particular monitor, you have to go in and change the monitoring template. So everything is template based. You got to go in to the manage node or a template, okay? And it's based on agent monitoring. So performance metric in Solution Manager, this is an example. The LVM system that we were looking at is also being monitored. We have the Java stack sitting on top of, MaxDB on top of a host. So the agent-based monitoring requires you to deploy all the SAP host agent as well as solution manager diagnostic agent on all of your managed nodes. Okay, so that can be quite tedious if you're managing, I don't know, 20 servers and they have 100 app servers. You could have it all deployed, right? And then once you deploy them, right, the monitoring and alerting infrastructure, MAI, pulls in the data from those. So the solution manager diagnostic agent actually do the local collection on this host, and then solution manager pulls them from there. And then once you pull them from there, you have to configure in Solman the monitoring scenarios, the templates, right? So how do you want to monitor that? And that's how you get this. So after you configure the templates, you will get the out-of-the-box functionality of what the scenario is that you monitor and the metrics that are included in that, right? So I think that this flash thing, what I do notice, pro and con about this is that it does sit here, it can refresh itself every 5 minutes, etc. But this flash actually chews up memories. I don't know if you have experience, but you sit here for a while and this actually grows to a couple gig of memory from the flash that's trying to update this on a regular basis. So you have to actually close it down and refresh it every now and then. So it's a nice, pretty chart you can get into, take a look at, and get a high level. If you want to deep dive into the troubleshooting of it, again, you can go to Alert Inbox. You have system-based alerts. You have all that. You can configure. The nice thing about the Solution Manager is supposed to be an engine where you can configure the thresholds. It's not very intuitive. You have to get into change configuration, and once you're into the change configuration, then you can override the managed node or the template. So here you can have managed object, you can have a template base, and if you just want to do one object, you have to go in there, see where the alerts are set, what threshold from green to yellow, yellow to red, and then configure those. It can be quite tedious if you're maintaining this for a lot of systems. So you want to go to more of a template base. So alerts and metrics, again, notification you can create. So the way they do it is you create, then you notify, and then you can confirm. So all these are based on templates. So you can actually, if you really want to create an incident out of a alert, and if you don't integrate into downstream system, the incident just sit inside SAP. And then you can configure notification. The templates, again, provide you ability to have custom schedule and recipient for the notification. Again, it's if you have a small operation, it's probably okay to set up. I think on a large scale, it requires a full-time Solman person to be doing all that, because it's quite in-depth as far as the way that it uses it. So you can maintain notification variants here as one of the example. The recovery action in Solution Manager we talk about is also based on notification variant. So, if you don't get any, you have to create a notification variant and assign auto reactions. So the auto reaction themselves, again, things that, in fact, it's not deliver a lot of them. So you have to build yourself if you want to do some level of auto reaction based on alert triggering an exception. So I think from Solman's standpoint, there is process automation for things such as they call them the guided procedures, the wizards. So if you're in an alert situation and it shows you that there are let's say guided procedure, there might be a check mark here or play button, then there are associated guided procedure to it. So guided procedure are actually just steps you have to do manually. It's not automated. It tells you these are manual steps or steps you can run to look into the issue. So as far as automation go, if you build it, you can create or execute guided procedures. So in a way, they try to tie in the automation piece to that, but we don't know a lot of customers actually use these guided procedures, the wizard-based ones. So it has kind of limited value in that sense of the word. So this kind of recaps the idea that we have solution manager, we have different point tool for LVM, we'll have DBA Cockpit, HANA Studio, HANA Cockpit, CCMS. All of these tools provide certain values to managing certain products. I think most customers have solution manager, whether they fully configure and use it and use it to its ability. You'd have to take a look at that, whether the monitoring itself and the management and notification, etc. setup is something you want to spend time doing. So I think I want to go back to these, and then is there any questions so far before I look at another solution? So as far as what we presented today, we take a look at high level. A lot of these are very in-depth, so if you have questions, you can follow up. You can look at some setups that we have in our blog. But I like to kind of go back to our here's the kind of IT conductor standpoint. So what is IT conductor, and what do we do with that? So we like to take a more simplified approach at IT conductor to managing. So instead of having CCMS, DBA Cockpit, Studio, to bring it all in. And today's talk is about things you can use immediately. And one of the top things that we kind of talk about is this little why do you need tools to help you with monitoring management? Well, in most cases, organizations have the tool. It's not they don't have the tool. So SAP provides you so many tools, some for this tool, some for that database, some for this application. But the struggle here, the most customers have outages and manage availability or loss of productivity issue, is that the troubleshooting tool they use don't give them the ability to find the root cause in a timely manner or proactively prevent them in the future, right? So it's a when something happens, go get it back up and running, but don't provide real root cause analysis. In the philosophy of you can use it right away, solution manager is something that you have to spend time configure, and if you spend the time, you probably can make it work for you. IT Conductor takes the approach that you can not have anything installed. So this is management without. So I would say this particular slide about our tool is to automate, monitor, manage, optimize, and you can start using this today without installing anything except a proxy connection to your system. And so the agentless monitoring and management as a service. So from that perspective, I'll give you a high-level overview. So in this approach, we have a simple dashboard. This one represents a service. A service represents monitoring of systems, applications, etc. This is a grid that can be built flexibly, or we deliver out-of-the-box templates to pre-configure monitoring of standard SAP scenarios like NetWeaver, database scenarios. And what we discover, we normally start monitoring. So for instance, in this particular case, I'm in a system, I can take a look at performance overview. We discover users logged in, CPU utilization, etc., and all of these are pre-built dashboards you can get into. But the ability for us to also not only show you information, but click in and dive in and get the actual in-depth detail behind specific. So for instance, users, you can get in there and you can click in and drill down, get the users, you see users running particular transactions, what was happening on the app server at that point in time. So this kind of takes you quickly from a service. So the idea of designing a system is to provide a service monitoring from the top service, and that service comprised of systems comprised of components, and service levels, right? So whether it be users, whether it be alerts, availability, etc., you can get that level of detail by getting in, driving from a top level. But the problem in most of the monitoring today you see is that there's not a close correlation between what happens at the bottom level, the infrastructure, and how it impacts the service. So in this approach, we build the flexible grid structure, so that when you have something down here, it would trickle up and show you impact on a service, so that various different roles in the organization can subscribe to the level of detail they want. So if they want to be notified of state change in their service, it went from good to bad, they can subscribe to the level. For admin, subscribe to root cause level, where it will show them what caused the problem. So as an example, we go to a demo. So all of you have access in the link I provided to sign up for a demo. So this one requires you to not install anything, except just you can poke around and see from our live system. So this is one of the dashboards, and you can see here the alerts that come in. You click into the alerts, they're context sensitive. They will go into the particular chart where it occurred. And we show you across the yellow, across the red. All of these are what we call threshold overrides. So you yourself can override the threshold, and your threshold might be different for various different systems, and that would trigger the state change. So that will basically create the alert or not, and then you can subscribe to get notified. But we go beyond the monitoring piece because there's automation in here. So in this one is a HANA index server physical memory threshold, and we can actually implement automation. So you can click on this here, and because this is a known issue with memory and HANA consumption versus cleanup, we implement garbage cleanup for this process as an example demonstration, that when we detect a scenario, we can kick off some garbage cleanup that will essentially clean up the unused memory to reduce the overall consumption on resident memory on the server, right? So this example of exception management gives you the ability to alert from a perspective of availability, performance, and take action from a notification as well as from an automation standpoint. Okay, and so I would encourage you to play that. There's a lot of discover applications. So for instance, ECC, BW, HANA, we support CES, which is the site-based systems. And we can look at Windows host, Linux host, SQL. So out of the box, most of the SAP NetWeaver systems are taken care of out of the box. There's nothing to configure except just to go through the wizard and then plug into a user ID that can monitor the system. So I want to be sensitive for time. We kind of have an hour and we start a little bit late. So I'm gonna pause right here. You feel free to go through the live demo guide. In fact, we prepared a demo that you can walk yourself through, and the steps on how to navigate all of this information. If you have any questions, you can send an email to demo@itconductor.com. But once you go through this, and you can actually sign up if you like, plug a couple of your SAP systems, and monitor that for free forever if you want to do that. So we would encourage and get welcome feedback for this. So there's really that approach where you have all the SAP content. So I have there's one last thing I do have is this matrix. If you are interested in this, I can post up a link for you to download. So everything I talked about today, comparison across the 7 areas of assessing the monitoring tools. You have ACE implementation, You have the performance metric collection, monitoring, the notification, recovery action, service reporting, etc., etc. So we try to, put in our experience on some of these areas, so that helps you to pick the right tool for the right monitoring job. And then far to the right, we also have comparison with IT Conductor. We also have an on-premise tool that works with System Center. Also provides monitoring for SAP as well as HANA, Sybase, etc. through a management packs. That tool's been around for 8 years now. So some of our global customers use that for enterprise-wide monitoring. Okay, so I actually have the link. I think the page I can put into the. Let me get the link, and I'll actually put it into the chat window, so we can see. Let me get that link. If you're interested, just go there and download that, and hopefully, it is some use for. Okay, that's the chat window. So I got a question. What is the typical time to set up a threshold system connection to get up and running? That question, are you referring to particular, what tool are you referring to? For IT Conductor, actually, the threshold systems connection, typical time, I'd say an hour to discover the system. And so as far as the tool is concerned, when you sign up, you get a validation email that you validate, and then once you validate, you log on. So the process is, in fact, I have a page here that might be easier to explain. So you go to one of our dashboards. We have so you create a remote agent, which as soon as you subscribe, that's one. You just download the agent, and then you connect the SAP system you want to monitor with the account. And we have a documentation on how that works. So the account then discovers the SAP agent and starts monitoring. The only thing you have to do here is specifically, I will take a look at and show very quickly. We take a different approach. We don't turn on a lot of the thresholds. You can override them just for things that you want to be notified about. So for example, if you go into any particular system here, well, this is an ECC system, you can go in and say, I want to be notified of I don't know, response time, for instance. Here is and let me show you what this is first. There's actually a transactional service level monitor, response times, etc. So if you want to put in a threshold here and say, notify me when my average response time for my VA01 or VAX transactions, in fact, you can just go in here, override the threshold. Very simple process. In this case, we set up default out of the box 15, so 1.5 seconds, and then if it's 5 seconds, give me an alarm, etc. So there's a lot of things that are subscriber based. So on your user ID or your role, so if you can subscribe on behalf of your company, then everybody gets it, or you have the dashboard. So we go back to the alerts in here created just because they are state change. So if you got failed batch jobs, etc., those things, you don't need to create any override. Actually, just out of the box functionality. But there are certain thresholds that you want. For instance, CPU or response times, or table space usage or something. It's a very simple override functionality that you can do, yeah. So I think that answered the question. If you want, you can go play with it, and it's very easy to. I think would say most of the customers who sign up get a system discovered within an hour or two, and then takes about maybe a day after we gather all the information. Then you can decide what's important to you in terms of threshold alerts, and then just create your various thresholds override. Okay. Yeah, so I really encourage you to, play around with it. There's way too much information to cover in this short time frame, but thank you for joining, and hopefully it's useful if I provided the link. If you go there and just put in your email, then you better download that matrix. Give us feedback if you see something that may be outdated or you have more information based on your experience. We'd love to hear your feedback, and we're always improving the information that we deliver to you that's available from the tools today. All right. So thank you for your time.